Good afternoon.
Wait, I think we are not on Whova yet, Despina. Checking the page.
Sorry, we are not in Whova.
I don't think so. Let me check. I'm refreshing the page in Whova. Yeah, we are there. Okay. So we can start.
Good afternoon. Welcome to the parallel session on the European industry. 3 projects, 7 sectors, 9 applications, 41 software components under the European Big Data Value Forum 2020. This the Now What session under the European Big Data Value Forum 2020. This session is sponsored by the EU AIDS 2020 I-BiDaaS project with the support of the EU AIDS 2020 Track and Know and BigDataStack projects. Before we start, I would like to remind you that the session is recorded. My name is Despina Kopanaki. I'm a project manager at Forth. Forth is a research institution in Greece and I'm also a member of the I-BiDaaS coordination team. On behalf of the I-BiDaaS Track and Know and BigDataStack consortiums, I would like to thank you for participating in this session. A few housekeeping rules before we start. You are all muted by default during this session. If you want to ask a question, we highly recommend to use the Q&A chat of this session in Whova. If this is not possible, you can use the Q&A panel of Zoom, or you can always raise the hand and we will unmute you. You can pose your questions at any time and the speakers we will be more than happy to reply at the end during the Q&A session. In case you experience any technical issue, please contact the session facilitator, Mr. Andrea Schilaggi. In this slide, you can see all the sponsors of the EBDVF 2020, and of course, I-BiDaaS, BigDataStack, and Track and Know are included. To start with, we would like to ask you a few questions to understand the kind of audience we have with us today. A pop-up window should appear in your screen where you can answer directly. You have 2 to 3 minutes for this poll.
Sorry to interrupt you, Despina. Actually, it was slightly different because I just put a link into the Whova chat, into the session chat. I would invite everybody to click in there. There's a question session open in Slido. So we are inviting all our attendees to please give their answer there.
Thank you, Andrea. Different from the previous time. Thanks for the information. Please click the link and provide your answers. It would be really nice to know a few things about your background. It will help the invited speakers. So in the meantime, I have the great pleasure to co-chair the session with Jenny Rainbird, Senior Manager at Inlicom System. Jenny is representing the Track and Know project, and also with Marik Williams from Trust IT Services. Marik is representing the BigDataStack project. We have the honor to have today with us in this session 3 invited speakers. Tony Steikova, co-founder and vice president of UK EMED from Track and Know project. Elon Rosen, professor of innovation and dean at the École de Paris Business School in France from the I-BiDaaS project. And Richard McGreedy, lecturer in information retrieval and data systems at the University of Glasgow from the BigDataStack project. The speakers, we will provide more information about their background later. So let's see today's agenda. The agenda is divided into 3 slots. We will start with introductory pitches, demonstrating the research highlights from each project and the purpose of this session. During the second slot, Marik will chair the speaker-led discussion that is aiming to answer the question of the impact of this research and the now what question. Jenny will wrap up the key findings of the session and moderate the Q&A session. So, the background. 3 projects, 1 synergy. The collaboration between I-BiDaaS, BigDataStack, and Track and Know started at the beginning of this year. The 3 BDV PPP projects decided to join their forces in a series of 9 online demonstrations under the BDV PPP Summit 2020. The Big Data Pilot Demo Day series of webinars showcase the implementation of the big data technologies in the pilot studies and their applicability to an ever wider scope contributing to Europe's digital future. So in case you're interested, all the webinars are available on each project's website, YouTube channel, and under the dedicated BDVA webpage that includes the webinars. Here you can see the QR code for each project that will redirect you to the webinars. So, driven by this productive and pleasant collaboration, we decided to join again our forces under the same context, but in a different direction. So the three projects are about to finish 3 years of research and innovation. And while the end is approaching, we are wondering, and now what is going to happen? This session will evolve around a discussion between experts to share their thoughts regarding the impact and uptake of big data research results. So the purpose of this session is to identify shared barriers to adoption of big data research in different sectors and mechanisms to overcome them, map the current and future impact and sustainability of their big data research, share best practices on the concrete business questions that have been answered in the project pilots. I would like to give you a quick overview of the three projects that are collaborating. The first one is I-BiDaaS, industrial-driven big data as a self-service solution. The key idea behind the I-BiDaaS project is to provide a self-service solution that empowers both IT and non-IT data experts to easily utilize and interact with big data technologies. The I-BiDaaS solution is being validated in 10 different use cases from 3 different sectors: financial, telecommunication, and manufacturing. In total, 11 components have been included in the I-BiDaaS solution, 5 of which are provided as open source. Second project is the Track and Know project, big data for mobility tracking knowledge extraction in urban areas, has been developing and applying big data toolboxes to mobility data for the healthcare, car insurance, and vehicle fleet management sectors. They have developed 9 applications with 13 different components. All of them are open source. BigDataStack, a holistic stack for big data applications and operations. BigDataStack is a unique, high-powered stack of solutions with a focus on providing fully efficient and optimized processes across the complete set of technologies required by data operations and data-intensive applications. They have developed 3 applications from 3 different sectors: retail, insurance, and shipping, with 17 software components, 14 of which are open source. Regarding the poll, let's see your replies. I don't know, Andrea, I'm not sure that I can see the result. Maybe you can comment.
Yes, Despina. So I think you're not able to see them directly into the platform. So we have the 62% of our attendee comes from the research and academia. The vast majority of them work with big data, and they are all interested in big data technologies to optimize their customer experience. And we have the 50% of them saying that the main barrier preventing them from implementing big data analytical solutions in their organizations, basically the lack of expertise. Mm-hmm. So this is a general overview of our audience today.
Thank you so much, Andrea. Okay, so without any further delay, I would like to pass the lead to Marik to start the panel discussion. Marik, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Despina. Thanks for this nice introduction. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us at the EBDVF 2020 afternoon session. I'm Marik Willems. Despina already presented me, so without further ado, I want to continue with moderating this session, the discussion between our experts. I'll be moderating the discussion that is titled Now What? So you've seen the 3 nice slides that Despina showed with all our results there and our achievements, but we want to engage you the people on in this session with our experts in discussing the now what after this these wonderful results. So thank you, Tony Stajkova, Elon Rosen, and Richard McCready to have agreed to join us in this discussion, to lead this discussion with your expert views. You've already been briefly introduced by Despina just now, but I want to give you all very briefly 1 minute opportunity to talk about yourself and your role in the project, so that the people on the call will understand the context of your comments and your insights in this discussion. Tony Stajkova, do you want to start?
Yeah, thank you. I'm a doctor with 25 years clinical experience and 10 years experience on European projects on clinical innovation. We are an SME based on the Cambridge Biomedical Campus. In the research projects we do, we bridge the gap between the clinical teams and the R&D partners to improve patient care. And specifically in the Track and Now project, we worked with the Royal Papworth Hospital to extract their specific requirements in the daily operations of the sleep apnea services, which serve a large geographical area with distributed facilities. So we led the requirements analysis for the big data analytics tools to gather the intelligence that does not normally exist with traditional hospital IT systems. We also supported the pilot work, stakeholder engagement, simulations, and we lead in the mapping of pursuing and of exploitation opportunities. Thank you.
Wonderful, Tony. Thank you. Elon Rosen, do you want to go next?
Sure. Hello, everyone. So my name is Elon Rosen. I am the Dean and Professor of Innovation at the École des Ponts Business School. So our mother school, which is the ENPC, is the oldest civil engineering school on the planet. It was actually created by Louis XV in 1747. So we've been around for a while, myself a little bit less. What we're really happy is that this project that we've been participating in is actually being run from our Circular Economy Research Center. And so I'd also like to shout out to Anastasia and George and Yorgos and Vladka and my good friend Hernan, who put a lot of work into this and working with Despina. And I was also just very happy to have been able to participate in two of the broader workshops in Mallorca and in Paris of this project. And so it makes me doubly happy to be here to present today.
Great, thank you, Elon. Richard McCready, the floor is yours.
Hi, so good afternoon. So I'm a lecturer at the University of Glasgow in the UK, specializing in data systems and information retrieval technologies. So in particular, I'm responsible for developing services within the Horizon 2020 BigDataStack project that aim to simplify the configuration, deployment, and management of containerized applications. So effectively, this is all about trying to help people get technologies up and running on cloud and cluster environments quickly and cheaply and efficiently. I also work extensively with deep learning systems for end user applications, both in BigDataStack and for other projects like the flagship Infinitec project.
Thanks, Richard. Thank you. While Despina is pulling up the slides again so that we can see the questions that we're going to ask our expert panel, I want to let you know that we want to pull as much information from our expert as possible in the limited time that we have. So I will be keeping time in a very strict manner, and I'll let you know when there's still 1 minute to go. So for the first question, how are we contributing to the European big data ecosystem? I would like to ask Elon Rosen to provide your insights into this from the project perspective. Elon, you have 7 minutes to tell us about your insights. Thank you.
All right, thank you. So I'll try to give my answer with a bit of structure. I'll use the hourglass approach, kind of starting from broad to narrow. And I'll try to address how the I-BiDaaS kind of project and consortium is an actor and enabler of the EU big data ecosystem, how it's an actor and enabler of what I would call EU-wide big data innovations, and also how it is an actor and enabler of something even bigger, I would say, in terms of purpose of kind of democratization of big data solutions, especially at the EU SME level, so the small and medium company level, which is a key component of any ecosystem. And so if I address point number one, the actor and enabler of the EU big data ecosystem, participating in the EBDVF consortium, we have 13 different partners from small, medium and large companies, multinationals, several institutions of higher learning, different kind of forms of academia, universities, business schools, and I think something like 8 different countries and probably something like double of that in terms of nationalities are represented here. We can cite countries like Cyprus and Croatia, France, Germany, Italy, Israel, Serbia, Spain, the United Kingdom, and I'm probably forgetting some, but it gives you a flavor of kind of this, I'd say, European approach. And so this ecosystem is already part of a broader ecosystem, like the other 3 projects in the forum that brings us together today is already another part of the ecosystem. And it's also helping to bring the ecosystem closer together. And I'd say even further, it's a catalyst for kind of developing the ecosystem, as what we're trying to do is bring in more companies and organizations into this EU big data ecosystem by kind of doing capacity building. And so it really feels like we're both, acting and enabling, and we're trying to do this with kind of an agile, lean, and I'd say bottom-up approach, which is kind of more European in style than anything else. In terms of like the enabling of, big data innovations, which is a key outcome of these projects. So, a few more numbers, and I won't tempt you to read what's behind my back, but trust me, it's there. But we're looking at something like 11 software components. We mentioned 5 were open source. We have like 10 European use cases across the 3 different sectors. And what we're proud of is having 5 innovations that were deemed mature by the EU Innovation Radar. And so, creating this much innovation, despite having so many partners, time zones, nationalities, and accents in English to manage, required kind of I'd say a lean innovation approach. And I'm really proud to say that we adopted a rapid prototyping kind of approach and framework that I've developed, which is called dynamic business modeling. And basically what we did in our workshops was collapse customer, product, and business model development into kind of one rapid prototyping phase. And it's kind of different from the usual business model canvases that maybe a lot of you are familiar with. And it actually helped us to kind of ideate multiple innovations quite quickly. And it allowed us to kind of use lean and agile principles to identify which were the most promising. And so the fact that 5 were identified as mature was really a testimony to that ability of the consortium to act in that kind of lean innovation manner. But one interesting challenge that came up with, and I'm sure some of you have seen that in your projects too, is that how do you get around restrictions in data sharing and data availability? Not to mention we had bank partners, so compliance issues and KYC issues and GPRD, all the usual. But because of this problem, initially we only used synthetic data. And we quickly discovered that this had too many limitations to make it actually practical. So we used kind of co-innovation, put our heads together, and we ended up finding a very powerful but simple, once you think of it, a solution. And that would be that the partners used encrypted and or anonymized data. And that allowed everybody to share the data effectively, and it just kind of reduced the time to data kind of input from like a month to a couple of days. So we were able to do much more and more quickly. And I think this is really a best practice that we can use in our projects in the future. The third kind of aspect, the actor and enabler of democratization, especially at the SME level. So I mentioned the 5 innovations that were kind of deemed as mature by the radar. 2 were deemed business ready, and 1 was actually deemed market ready, which is kind of the holy grail in the EU Innovation Radar system. For those who aren't familiar with it, it just basically means that it's ready to go to market. And so that it's actually it has validated proof of concept and it's ready to go to market. And one of the keys to driving big data kind of ecosystem expansion is kind of moving data analytics beyond the scope of just Fortune 1000 companies and giving much broader access to SMEs, especially since we have a lot of them across Europe. And so the example that I'd like to share is the market-ready technology is called MUSES. I won't go into the acronym, but MUSES, by a spinoff called QBeast of the Barcelona Supercomputer Center. And basically this came out of the project. It's a data cloud platform that uses kind of an innovative data storage technology. And what does that mean? Basically, it offers kind of a future-proof and simple architecture. It allows blazing fast data analytics that usually require much more computing power than this would, and analytics that can run on smaller data sets. And when you see future-proof, blazing fast, and smaller data sets, you can see a small and medium-sized company going check, check, check. That's all I can actually afford for this kind of project. And so what it does is really opens up the floodgates and makes these kind of solutions more readily accessible to SMEs and really democratizes kind of using big data analytics across the continent. And I think we're all proud of this outcome. This was just an example, but several of the other innovations are moving in that direction too. And the entire EBDVF project has this democratization of big data analytics as its kind of mission. So that's it for me this time around, Marika, and I'll hand over to Tony. If
it was excellent, Elon. And exactly in 7 minutes, you linked to the 3 pillars: dynamic business modeling, overcoming the data sharing challenges, and democratization of big data software. So, Richard, how are we contributing to the European big data ecosystem in BigDataStack?
Okay, so before I start talking about precisely what BigDataStack does, I think it's important to highlight where I think the sort of big data ecosystem is currently heading in the near term, to give some context about where BigDataStack and potentially other projects fit into this space. So in general, what we're seeing is we're seeing movement towards consolidation of data and software services into large centralized marketplaces where they can be freely bought and sold. The core goal or reason why this is happening is to ease the discoverability of services, data, and models for commercialization, while simultaneously, well, hopefully reducing barriers to entry for using those data and services by standardizing how they are provided to users. From an EU perspective, they obviously hope to try and improve the competitiveness of European businesses and more generally obtain the benefits of a data-driven economy through the use of such marketplaces. The way that BigDataStack fits into this sort of wider vision is as a supporting technology stack that aims to make it easier for companies to take these services, data, and models obtained from such marketplaces or otherwise developed in-house and then put them into production systems. So how basically providing more tooling to take some of these systems and then make it easy to get them running and generating business value. To give a kind of more detail on this, I think it's maybe good to use an illustrative example. So let's consider a company, say a grocery retailer. So this is one of the use cases in BigDataStack, who's opening an online storefront. The business developer of that company might decide, okay, they want to go and provide product recommendations for their companies based on the customer's shopping history. But how would they actually go about achieving this? Well, for small companies, they probably have significant technology and knowledge gap challenges that they need to overcome, which is not trivial where they're less likely to have in-house expertise. And so a company like that might go to one of these central marketplaces and try to obtain maybe a large grocery recommendation data set, or otherwise maybe services that provide deep learning technologies for doing high quality product recommendation. But once they have these, what do they actually do with it? How do they go and put these into production? And BigDataStack is effectively a series of tools or services to try and make this process easier. So at its core, BigDataStack is a set of containerized services that aim to simplify and automate as much of the sort of configuration, deployment, and management of the different user applications for use on containerized cloud services, and particularly targeting applications that require a lot of data and a lot of compute to actually manage that data. So we're talking about deployments in either large private clusters or public clouds. And while it's possible to look at BigDataStack as like this big set monolithic platform which provides sort of end-to-end tooling for taking us services and then getting them running on clouds, it's easier to kind of think about it as a series of modular components that aim to make particular aspects of that process easier. So the way I like to break this down is to think about it in terms of, okay, what do I need to do before deploying my application? How do I do deployment? And then what do I do after I've deployed my application? So for pre-deployment, BigDataStack has been innovating in the area of sort of business modeling, and how do we go and take services and model those into a wider application that provides business value. So BigDataStack provides sort of three main services here. So we have services for process modeling, which is about trying to come up with a high-level view of what does a new business-oriented service look like. We have process mapping that tries to take that high-level concept and then map that into defined services that can be deployed. And then we have the data toolkit, which allows the configuration of those services and the loading of those services with data. Then if we move further down into the stack, down into, okay, I've got my services, now how do I go and deploy them? BigDataStack builds off containerized management software in the form of Kubernetes and OpenShift, and extends that with an additional management layer called the realization engine. And this is to make it easier and provide more functionality for both deploying and then subsequently managing in a data-driven way complicated applications. And then finally, and possibly most importantly, once you've deployed your application, you need to manage it. The cost in actually running applications is mostly tied up in the subsequent manage and keeping those systems running. And so BigDataStack has been developing new automated management tooling for both tracking the state of applications at runtime, evaluating their quality of service, and then performing automated decision making to make sure that we can automatically meet quality of service objectives and adapt our deployment to meet those. And so all of these services together form the core of what we consider to be the BigDataStack offering. And in total, this kind of makes it easier for us to take services, that we can maybe get from these big marketplaces and then make it easier and simpler and require less expertise to deploy those onto cloud infrastructures. Of course, BigDataStack also provides some other benefits in terms of the ecosystem. So we also contribute to other open source projects. So for example, we have 10 different open source products, and we have contributed to other products like OpenShift itself. And we've also, as part of our use cases, developed particular frameworks to help provide the actual data services that different end users might deploy. For example, to take the example I just talked about, we have developed a framework called BetaRexis for state-of-the-art product recommendation, which is currently being taken forward in a separate project, the flagship Horizon 2020 Infinitec project. And that will then be made available within one of these marketplaces, in particular, the pan-European multi-sided market platform that's being developed as part of that particular project. So that's kind of like how BigDataStack fits into this whole ecosystem.
Thanks, Richard. Thank you. It's very interesting to see how BigDataStack contributes to ease discovery, removing barriers, and improve in this way the competitiveness of the European Union in the data ecosystem. So you gave the example of the smart consumer use case, where business modeling focuses on the process modeling, the process mapping, and the data toolkit. Now, it's time to move to the second question. Despina, can I ask you? Thank you. So the second question is, what is the role or the impact of new technologies in the industry? So what barriers did you encounter with the industries in your products, and how can we apply big data in businesses? So I would like to ask Tony Saikova to take the floor and to answer our question in under 7 minutes. Tony, thank you. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I would like to focus on the barriers, and I would like to distinguish barriers to implementation from barriers to exploitation, although some of them do overlap. And the reason I want to do that, because there is a specific message in there. So let me just tell you first what we found to be the most challenging ones and what we've done to overcome them. So to go back to our own business case in Track and Know, we focus on gathering novel intelligence about our service operations across a geographical area, and we want to use this intelligence as well as the simulation tools to make decisions on service positioning and optimization. This is about a hospital service. So we did encounter several common barriers to implementation. And the first one is the gap in understanding between technical and clinical partners. The clinical partners required some time in order to ease into the terminology of the projects, understand the different technical domains involved and what they do, as well as the possible application of the big data in the business domain. The technical partners required some time to understand the clinical reality and the degree of available ICT at the moment. And I see this over and over again, that non-medical people discover with surprise that in healthcare, ICT is a lot less advanced in its use than at industry domain. And mostly of this is due to various limitations such as data protection, ethical regulations, patient safety concerns, etc., as well as some management decisions, for example, purchasing decisions for tools. So in our project, our technical partners had to realize that what is used in other industries and taken as normal does not exist in healthcare at all. And although our business case seemed rather ordinary to them at a first glance, during our work together, they learned to appreciate the clinical significance and the societal impact of our business case. So this change is especially after we started running workshop events. They saw the positive reaction of the stakeholders and the interest. And once we got the results and the demo, we managed to prove the strength of our business case and the potential impact. Another important barrier I want to mention is the usual problem with obtaining anonymized data from the NHS or any clinical organization or database. And while for us this is not really a real barrier in our project, we know that it's common in many projects. And because we were aware of this at a very early start of the project, and thanks to the involvement of the right decision makers at the NHS from the beginning, we actually managed to achieve data access on time. And what's important, we even managed to obtain additional data which pertain to our second business case on driving behavior, thanks to Royal Papworth Hospital's ability to set up an experimental driving study and get the ethical approvals again within the project time. And we do hope to find researchers who are interested in analyzing our data and work with us beyond the project end. Please contact us if you're interested, because we do have a real treasure for researchers, which has not yet been fully analyzed. As a third barrier to implementation, I would like to mention the COVID crisis, which brought on a new challenge. This was obviously the reduction of NHS staff participation over a period of time and the need to modify the pilot because real life deployment was no longer possible of the optimized service due to government crisis measures. But we did find a good solution to bridge the gap with changing pilot validation to available service data from different periods. So we did overcome this. So the main message here is our overall experience shows that the communication gap between the different domains is the most difficult part to bridge. But when we work together on such projects, this gap gets smaller. And that's what is going to lead to the more expertise in implementing big data in healthcare, because if you don't understand what this is about, how can you accept it? So the communication is the key issue that I would like to stress, and it's not the commonest one which is mentioned. For example, barriers to exploitation. The usual barriers encountered by projects are regulatory and lack of stakeholder take-up. And we were aware of those, and our timely work on data privacy and ethics has actually helped address the regulatory issues. And also our early engagement of stakeholders has been very effective. But what we would like to flag again as a barrier to straight deployment of a new tool is this traditional research and innovation projects composition of a consortium, which is very interdisciplinary, enrich in different expertises. And while this is good for truly innovative outputs, it also poses a challenge to identify who owns what IP, who wants to take what result further and how. It is very, very important to address this as early as possible. So for example, we have many non-commercial partners who are more interested in publication and further research than actual commercial exploitation. And that's fine, it's perfectly normal. But for us, in order to take this baby to see the daylight, we had to streamline the effort. So we worked from a very early stage on defining who would take those results further and how. And we did manage to define a core group of 3 entities which will focus on commercial tool development beyond project end. We also are very happy to partner with our research organizations on certain questions, but for commercialization, we did define a core group of 3. And surely, in order to take those results further, we also need funding in order to provide more testing opportunities for our tool to the NHS and other partners. And we did succeed in obtaining such additional funding, but I will share the secret later on in the next part of the session. Thank you.
Thanks, Tony. Thank you very much. It's a very interesting identification of the main barrier that is really linked to both your gaps, no? The barriers to implementation and exploitation. It really is all about communication between different domains and different sectors that you're pointing out here. Thank you very much for this.
Thank you.
Richard, do you want to take on this question for BigDataStack, please?
Okay, so yes. So I'm going to have a different perspective, and I'm going to focus more on technologies. In particular, I want to talk about 2 particular technologies which I think are being very disruptive in the way that we develop and deploy applications these days. So one of the most important enabling technologies that has driven innovation and has made it possible for applications to be shared, bought, and sold is the wide-scale adoption of containers or containerized services. As just a very quick introduction for those that are unfamiliar, a container is a mechanism via which application code, along with an associated environment, can be packaged together into a single unit. The idea here is that once a container has been built, it can be run on almost any platform subject to available resources and if configured correctly. This allows developers to construct reusable components, as well as enabling the marketplaces that I talked about previously. And containers are big business, and they seem to be the de facto standard of how we actually deploy things these days. So the analyst firm Gartner predicts that 3 years from now, 70% of organizations will be running 3 or more containerized applications in production. So this is how we expect effectively containers to take over over the next few years. And this aligns with our observations from BigDataStack and other projects that we've been involved in, like Infinitec, which is also using containers as the standard for next generation financial services. And so I can confidently say that containers are in fact the future of big data compute. And if we look at, or if I consider what we learned from working with containers with our different end users, while there was some initial training needed to get these companies up to speed with the new technology because they hadn't worked with it before, our end users are very impressed by the ease of use and portability of their applications. And I think that they will continue to develop containerized applications into the future. Additionally, containers provide a standardized mechanism which enables things like data-driven infrastructure management, which I sort of mentioned as what BigDataStack is trying to achieve, which enables user application and also database services to be distributed onto remote infrastructures like clouds and clusters, enabling big data processing at scale for even small companies. And if we go a bit further, I think that there are still some really important benefits of containers, which are only now just starting to be realized. So if we look at it from a business perspective, containers or container service marketplaces, as they become more widely used, it will become much easier for businesses to access state-of-the-art algorithms and solutions and then deploy them in production using platforms like BigDataStack, because they will just be able to go to these platforms and get a state-of-the-art solution off the shelf for the thing that they actually need. Meanwhile, as containerized solutions increasingly start to implement common standards, which is, for example, Infinitec is trying to lay down container standards for the financial domain, runtime orchestration, as well as rollout of incremental improvements to applications, such as to improve security or effectiveness, will be able to be automated, dramatically reducing the cost of maintaining these applications. And so my general recommendation is, if you haven't tried containers, I would recommend that you do so. I think these are a major innovation and they're going to become ubiquitous in the next few years. The second main technology that I wanted to highlight, which has been highly disruptive in terms of big data processing, is deep learning, which might be colloquially known as AI. While there is excessive levels of hype around about AI applications, deep learning, when paired with big data, is resulting in much better systems than was previously possible only a few years ago. For those of you who've not really worked much in the deep learning space, at its core, it's simply a more effective means for a computer to identify and record patterns when analyzing extremely large data sets. For example, one of the most sort of well-known applications for deep learning is for natural language processing tasks. So these are things like machine translation or question answering, and where like a more recent model would be something like GPT-3, which was effectively trained on a filtered version of the entire web, plus a large number of book corpora and Wikipedia, comprising about 500 billion tokens. And if you tried to go and train one of these models on a single machine with a single GPU, this would take you around about 350 years and would cost you about $4.5 million at current cloud costs on Amazon. And so this is a sort of new frontier in big data processing, where there is a lot of innovation and a lot of potential improvements that can happen. And this has only recently become possible due to advances in sort of GPU compute and reduction in costs there. However, while I think that this is the future, and this is kind of the new frontier that we need to be working on, there are challenges that are currently not well solved for people that want to work in this area. And this is where I think there is interesting directions both for BigDataStack and for other projects in trying to make working with these type of applications easier and more efficient. So I'll highlight some key challenges that I think need to be overcome. First of all, when we're working in these kind of big distributed environments, as I said, containers are kind of the way of the future. They're how people are deploying applications. But containerized support for these big new deep learning models are not well supported because GPU and resource management inside these applications is not well supported. So if we think about how we can manage resources on clouds, we can share compute and memory across multiple applications. This is not true for GPUs currently. You can assign a GPU to a container, but you can't share it. There are also some interesting sort of technical challenges due to the actual software space around about GPUs and deep learning. In particular, we're currently dominated by a single hardware provider, which is NVIDIA. Although maybe based on updates from last week, we might also have a competitor with AMD, but there, in any case, these different providers are using different APIs, which is leading to software fragmentation, which is something that will need to be overcome for these kind of technologies to become generalizable. Now, more positively, I think that over the next few years, these issues are going to be resolved. And by doing so, this will decrease significantly the cost and ease of access to these kind of deep learning technologies, which will make it much easier for small to medium-sized businesses to make use of very large data sets and really get these kind of state-of-the-art performances. Okay.
Thanks, Richard. That was very useful. So you were talking about the containers that are the future of the big data compute and the new frontier in big data innovation in terms of deep learning that is resulting in much better systems. Can we proceed to the third question and the final question? It's a very short one, but I think you can really about your teeth into this. So now what, Alan? Now what in terms of I-BiDaaS?
All right. Yeah, simple, but good question. So the first time I structured it in an hourglass going this way, allow me to do it this way, and going from kind of broad to narrow to broad. Let me start with the project level. So for first, kind of a word of background. So let me open a parentheses here. So the I-BiDaaS solution kind of has three different, what we call modes of using it. One is a self-service mode, one is an expert mode, and one is something we call a code develop mode. And each one is kind of adapted to the in-house data science skills and resources of the organization that's using the solution. So let's close the parentheses on that. And one of the key outcomes that came out of this is that we've created something like a user guide, an I-BiDaaS user guide, which we kind of informally refer to as the cookbook. I know this is something Despina really likes as well, but this cookbook kind of really allows any organization, even with very limited in-house kind of data science resources, to get going with powerful big data solutions that usually only the big boys kind of have access to, and both quickly and economically. And I think it's a pretty exciting outcome in terms of where this is going, is that not even the now what, but the what next, is I think this will spread quite a bit across the EU kind of SME landscape, and even beyond that, even to larger organizations that don't have the in-house skills and are presently using maybe consultants for that. And so that's one at the project level that I'm really excited about. At the consortium level, another interesting kind of outcome is, I don't know how well our audience knows EU research projects, but one exciting outcome here is that at the end of the project, which is supposed to wind down at the end of this year, at the end of 2020, actually the consortium will continue to live and work together as an agile kind of ecosystem. And the code develop mode that I mentioned earlier is kind of, you use the cookbook. So an organization takes the user guide, the cookbook, identifies the use case that it would like to apply, and basically the different members of the consortium are configured together to support the customer and kind of tailor and adapt the solution to their needs. So it's really, the idea is to take the innovations to market, help these companies with their data science, I don't know, we could call it capacity building, I guess, and so that they can gain in maturity, climb the experience and learning curve, and most importantly is kind of train and upskill in-house talent. And when that happens, they can use the cookbook for the self-serve solutions. So it's kind of a do-it-yourself DIY kind of approach. But even more importantly, and this is in the broader of like, where's this EU big data ecosystem going, is, we all know that the biggest constraint today in the market is the lack of talent. And what I-BiDaaS actually helps us do is kind of unlock that key constraint, and so that the SMEs and other organizations can groom in-house talent, and they can, climb the learning curve, and they don't longer kind of addicted to consultants, to IT consultants or IT partners, and even using kind of, I'd say, the non-EU big tech firms. And so it helps raise the bar at kind of the operational level across the landscape. And it creates that kind of, I don't know, I could call it agility in action kind of phenomena at the EU big data ecosystem level. And that could be a really interesting kind of outcome for something like this. I think, again, today's forum with the three projects coming together is a testimony to kind of this idea of how the synergies can operate. And I guess the last level, which I think is really important to think about the now what, is at the geopolitical level. You know, what role is Europe going to be playing in this, you know, very key strategic sector in the years to come? And, you know, again, the project, as I mentioned earlier, we have 13 partners, 8 countries, and de facto, we're kind of like an emergent EU tech ecosystem or big data ecosystem. And, you know, for those who are into fractals, like we're a fractal of the bigger EU ecosystem. And, you know, if we look at the 3 partners today, it's kind of an extra fractal of that as well. And, you know, I think we're all kind of frustrated, or at least I am, with kind of EU elected officials and politicians that can't quite unite on this subject. You know, we're really moving very fast, unfortunately, to a polarized tech world, kind of where the US and China are each trying to establish kind of a tech hegemony, and they're taking no prisoners on the way. The EU becomes kind of a marketplace, but not in the sense that Richard mentioned, but more in the sense of picking off our most promising startups and technologies and taking it home with them. And for me, I-BiDaaS is kind of a glimpse at like a potential future where we have a unique European approach to establishing a powerful ecosystem. It's not by creating these supersized tech kind of mega giants, and it's not by dictate, but it's by doing something that's really, I'd say, European in its DNA, which is showing how formal and informal collaboration across sectors and countries can create powerful kind of synergies with widely distributed benefits instead of narrowly held profits, which seems to be the model until now. It's kind of like a, I guess you could call it a value economy approach rather than a winner take all approach. And I think that's more European in style in any case. And so I-BiDaaS kind of, I'd say, is the key outcome at the end for me, is that this has really made me hopeful that this is not just like a possibility, it's not a utopian dream, but it's actually something that's already happening at this scale. And I just hope that maybe in our audience today, we have a few elected officials who are on the line and paying attention, because maybe that's the way forward. Anyway, thanks. I'll hand off to Tony now.
Thanks, Helen. Thanks very much for putting, for highlighting how you're going to proceed as an agile ecosystem with I-BiDaaS, placing the project and the synergy in the bigger geopolitical level, and highlighting the cookbook to overcome the lack of talent. Now, Tony, can I ask you to formulate your answer in a little bit shorter time? Could you be able to do this in 4 minutes?
Yes,
Thank you.
So. Okay. After Ellen gave the global perspective, I'm now going to give you a very specific example for our now what, as I promised. Our initial plan up until the COVID crisis was that we would offer to the NHS to use the optimization tool developed by Track and Know, subject to finding more funding to run the venture until we get a critical user mass and more NHS can come abroad, on board. And also we were looking for related social services that would use the same tool in order to leverage the chances. But looking back now, it's actually quite uncanny how well we were placed in time, because the COVID crisis came and converted the problem that we were addressing with Track and Know into a much bigger issue. As you may know, the NHS waiting lists have suffered a severe backlog, and there are no tools to help the managers decide how to clear the backlog, how to use any alternative service deployment options, such as, for example, additional locations of home visits instead of clinic visits, and so on. So the NHS had no tools to analyze this and calculate different options when the crisis struck. So at that time, which was month 28 of the Track and Know project, or 8 months before the official end, it just happened that Innovate UK launched a funding call for applications for COVID solutions that would address any problems that are related to the crisis. And as I mentioned before, and that's where early thinking is really important, we were already a predefined group of 3 partners interested in commercialization of the TK tools for the health pilot. And it is also important that we were clear that our organizations in the Papworth Hospital and my organization, we were also capable of engaging in go-to-market activities. So on initiative of partner Inlecom, we did prepare an application to develop business intelligence and decision support tools. So that means to extend the track and know tools for patient referral allocation. The proposal was called Backlog, building on track and know, and specifically addressing COVID crisis needs. And amongst 8,600 applications, we managed to score grant approval. So the Backlog project started in June and is due to finish end of November. We are now at the stage where our tools have been developed and are in the phase of demo and business planning. We were planning a spin-off for early 2021 to take this further to commercialization, and we are receiving business coaching. So that's our stage where we are at the moment. So allow me just to use the couple of minutes to share our advice or share our secrets. So first of all, it's obviously early planning of exploitation and definition of partners and IP is a must. The second thing is keep open eyes for funding opportunities. Do not wait for the project to end, because then you're likely to drown in that commercialization valley of death that everybody's talking about in the business seminars. If you have well-documented IP like a patent in place, like we had in this case, this definitely helps your credibility to be funded and taken seriously. Also keep an eye out for related domains where you could leverage your potential customers. Do your ethics and your data protection assessment on time so you don't stumble into difficulties, because that usually causes delays, and that's where you fall into the valley of death. And promote, just like I'm doing now. Talk to stakeholders, talk to your children, just to learn to explain your project, and don't sit in the corner waiting for someone to find you after reading your paper and after they appreciate your scientific merits. This is great for science, but if you want to commercialize, go promoting, otherwise it's not going to work. And do run an ongoing risk analysis in order to manage your risks proactively. And when a totally unforeseen risk like COVID strikes, don't get shocked, because the real winners convert the problems into opportunities. And we consider ourselves to be one of the lucky winners in this specific case. So just to summarize, what is our now what balance of the health pilot in the Track and Know project? The pilot 2 has a patent, follow-on project, place in the final top 5 at the European Success Story competition, a joint venture spin-out plan, appearance on TV, 2 highlights in popular magazines, and the real stakeholder community with real feedback. Also open data, open software, and runs on a platform. So if you would like to find out more about our secrets, we're very happy to share them with you. Please do not hesitate to contact us. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tony, for this very positive end note of this discussion. I think it's a wonderful example of an extension of a European-funded research and innovation project that really contributes also to an unexpected crisis. So really helping to solve, fight the COVID-19 crisis. Thank you so much for sharing this. I want to thank all the speakers of, so I want to thank Alan, I want to thank Richard and Tony for sharing your wonderful insights on the now what of these three projects. But I give, rapidly, I give the word to Jenny, who will formally close our session and give some opportunities to our audience as well. Jenny, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Marie. Thank you to all our speakers. And unfortunately, we are slightly running out of time to be able to go to all of our questions. But I would just like to say that thank you to all of the people that have joined us in this session and for your engagement in both the poll and posing some questions. We've had a couple in the Wavo platform and some in the chat here. So I'll have a quick look at those just now. I don't think, unfortunately, we have very much time to answer all of the questions that you've posted. So I'm going to pick the one that's in the chat because I think that's kind of an interesting one. And I think all three of you, of our panelists, will be able to answer. So although we have little time, could you give me the one sentence or the one or two sentences considering your lessons learned, what would you do differently? And I'll go to Alain first. One sentence, what would you do differently if you could do this all over again?
I think we would have figured out the passage to encrypted and anonymized data much earlier to solve the data access problem.
Thank you. Richard, same question to you.
Revisit your description of work at the end of each year. You will have missed things, and if you then get to year 3 and realize that you've forgotten something fundamental, you're in trouble.
Wise advice. And Tony, one thing you'd do differently?
I would probably get one more partner to help me communicate and do this marriage between technical and clinical, and we probably would have been even faster.
Thank you so much. We also have the questions posted on the Wavo platform. So what we'll try and do is our speakers have access to that. And any other questions you had after you've digested what we've spoken about, please post them in the Q&A on the Wavo platform, and our speakers will endeavour to answer those. So that just leaves me with 1 minute, less than 1 minute, to thank Despina and Marique from the I-BiDaaS and BigDataStack projects. You've both been so enthusiastic and inspiring, and from the Track and Know project, we'd really like to thank you for this great collaboration that we've had over the past year. Also, I'd like to thank the EBDVA team for organising this event and for giving us this opportunity. And to our audience, thank you so much for joining us. Please visit our websites, follow us on social media. We've got lots of material to download. So please get in touch with us, and thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you all, and thank you for joining us. Goodbye.
Thank you for organizing it and giving us the opportunity. Thank you.